You're listening to the Faith Breathed Hope podcast, episode number 214. Today I speak with husband, father, former executive for large houses of worship, award-winning speaker, author of Running on Full, and coach at Refill Coaching, helping leaders and teams lead from a full tank, Mitch Harrison, on turning stress and burnout into replenishment so that you can lead well. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Faith Breathed Hope. I'm your host, Christina Reisinger, and today I am here with Mitch Harrison. Hey, Mitch, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Great, Christina. Thanks for having me on.
I am glad to have you. And first of all, I'd love for you to share. And to full disclosure, I did not warn him of this. I usually do, but I'd love to put you on the spot and ask you to share with the audience something, exciting about yourself that maybe not everybody in your circle knows. Is there something that you might want to share?
Wow. Gosh, I think that probably the most exciting thing as of late is this book that I wrote, and it just got released yesterday. And so it's still kind of surreal for me to think, man, I got this book that's got my name on it out there. It looks like this right here. And, it's been an exciting journey to get to this point to do that. But I'm really excited more that there's this resource that people are going to be able to use.
Yes. Well, congratulations. And then we'll just get right into it. So today we're going to talk about stress and how to overcome some of that stress and get outside of this area of a burnout so that we can just be the people that God wants us to be. So I'd love for you just to share a little bit about yourself, and then we will start talking about your book.
Sure. People ask me all the time, how do you get to be an expert on burnout? And there's usually a couple of ways. One, you can read a lot of books. The easier way to do it and the harder way to do it both is you just walk through it yourself. And that's really what happened to me. I was the executive pastor of a large church out here in Las Vegas where I live and had been that for a long time and really noticed that looking back, I kind of went through these cycles of where I would kind of bump up against burnout a bit, take some time and recover, get it back together enough to keep going. And uh, then one day I found myself burning out to the point that I couldn't recover anymore. And I'd never had anything like that happen to me to that extent, but found myself sitting in my office one day thinking, man, I just don't know if I can keep going. And when I was thinking I don't know if I can keep going, I didn't really mean I don't know if I can keep doing this job. I meant I don't know if I can keep going. And you know, uh, talked to some people, talked to my lead pastor who was a good friend, and realized, man, this we probably should get some help. And so I ended up going to some counseling that was about a week long, an intensive that a guy I know did, and spent some time recovering there. Um, all total, it took me about 6 months to start feeling like a normal person again, and learned a lot about what makes burnout happen and what makes recovery possible. And from that season, it just seemed like God had kind of turned my attention in the direction of really caring about people who were struggling like that, particularly leaders of different things. And just found my way into uh, some work to help people who were struggling with burnout. So that's a little bit of how I got started doing this, and have found myself a few years down the road now. I have transitioned from my work at the church and do this kind of work full time of helping church leaders, business leaders, helping church staffs, business teams, those kind of things, to deal with this issue of burnout and do it a lot better than maybe we've ever done before.
You know, that is a topic. Burnout is a topic that I hear a lot of people discussing or chattering about lately.
Yeah.
And it's something I think that is very hard. You made a comment about bumping up against it and then coming back. And I'm probably going to get this not verbatim, but coming back long enough to look like you're recovering, and then finally finding this place where it's just there was no recovering from it. You have to acknowledge what's going on. How difficult is it for people to say, hey, you know what? Enough is enough. I have to acknowledge the fact that there's something going on here that I can't control, I can't fix, and I need to make a change.
Yeah, I think, our own survival instinct, our own sense of, kind of youthful enthusiasm or whatever you want to call it, um, tells us that we can just keep on going, that I can recover one more time, I can rally one more time. And we do. We find some way to do that. We find something to help us. Maybe we just, call a timeout and we go away for a couple days or a week or whatever. We start feeling some better, and we rally. But I think there comes a point when rallying is not possible anymore. Like when your body says, "Okay, enough is enough," and it starts to cause kind of this debilitating effect where the things that you used to be able to do, you just can't do anymore. And at that point, you start to realize something's got to give, something's going to have to change.
Mhm. So does it always show up physically? Is that what you're talking about? Your body says this, or is this a mental transition to where you just can't make things happen anymore?
Yeah, I think I think what I found is that we are really holistic creatures. I mean,
Mhm.
we're all of it together, right? I mean, our
Okay.
our emotions don't function separately from our body. You talk to people who struggle with depression, they tell you they feel it in their body. They feel an achiness in their body. I think we're all one thing. And
Mhm.
people will ask, is it a mental thing? Is it a spiritual thing? Is it a physical thing? And I think it's probably all of the above.
Mhm.
At one time, at some point where the stress that we're experiencing begins to catch up with us, and it's too much for the kind of whatever replenishment that we have had going in. And
Mhm.
we find out that there's a point again where recovery is very, very difficult, or it's very far away. And I think that's what I experienced was, I got to the point where, and I used to be able to, I could rally here and there. I could take my days off, or I could go on a little vacation, and I could rally and I could kind of get back enough energy to keep going. But then there just came a point where it felt like that kind of recovery was way far away. It was at least months away. In fact, I remember thinking I could hang on for about 4 months, and that's about it. And I don't know what happens after 4 months. And every day that went by, that 4 month mark didn't get farther away. It just kept getting closer, that I felt
Mhm.
like I don't think I can keep hanging on like this. And so yeah, I think you start to notice it in everyday tasks where you have moments where you just want to give up, or moments where you're just kind of done. And one of the things I've noticed that in this framework that I teach, we can talk about that in a little bit. Um, in these frameworks that help us, these rhythms that help us with burnout and to help us to stay healthy, behind those are really the symptoms of burnout and how it starts to show up in us.
I'm feverishly writing down here. So, what's funny is you said that you help leaders, and I have had so many conversations with, I guess you would say, everyday women,
Mhm.
friends lately that have said, you know what, I just am struggling because of all of the things that you just mentioned. I'm coming against this thing where it's no longer that a vacation or a couple of days helps. It might help get a little bit of a boost here and there. You may get some small successes and some small wins here and there that help you keep going. But it's just this place where you just kind of want to just walk away almost, where, I told somebody the other day, I said, I feel sometimes like I just want to go dig a hole and put my head in the sand.
Yeah,
Like it's just too much. And then you start thinking about things and like, how is it that you can't handle it? How is it that,
yeah,
all these things that I think you even mentioned this just a second ago, that you used to be able to manage, you used to be able to handle them. They all of a sudden become something that you're almost beating yourself up against, like a wall or something, and it's
right.
pushing back. Can you explain that a little bit better so we understand why is this
Sure.
happen at certain ages, at a rite of passage? I mean, let you.
Sure. No, and you're right. I do spend a lot of time talking to business leaders, church leaders about this kind of thing, but this happens to everybody. In fact, if you're running a household, you're leading a family, you have things that you are in charge of. And so this is the basic equation for all of this. Stress and replenishment have to equal. They have to balance. If you get those out of whack, that's when the crash starts to show up. Um, People talk a lot these days about work-life balance,
Mhm,
and I think what I hear them saying is I need to limit the hours of work that I have so that I have more hours of my life to catch back up and to replenish. But that's really
mhm,
not the way it works because as anybody who has raised young kids knows, as anybody who is a part of a family knows and who's trying to manage a household knows, there's as much stress oftentimes that comes from life as there is that comes from work.
mhm,
Um, so it, I think it's really probably not the best framework to use. What I advocate for is this, that we balance our stress with kind of replenishment that we need. For
mhm,
instance, I was running a half marathon one time through Vegas, and I was chugging along doing pretty good until mile 11, and then something happened at mile 11. I went about another half mile, and I couldn't run anymore. I mean, I literally had to stop in the middle of the street and go over and lean on a guardrail for a while. And this had never happened to me running before. I mean, I'd done distances, I'd done all the training and all the stuff. And it took about 20 minutes for me to get it together enough to even like walk and get across the finish line. It was really bad. And I asked some friends, what had happened. And they said, well, you didn't eat enough, man. I mean, look at what you did eating the week before and what you did the day, because I was trying to be all light, not carry extra weight and all the stuff you tell yourself. And I just didn't eat enough. I had too much stress without enough replenishment, and I crashed. It's pretty. We understand that pretty simply in that sense. Well, the same thing happened to me in my office that day. I'd had too much stress because of my job and family and other things that were going on, and not enough replenishment. And I did that over a long enough period of time that eventually caught up with me, that if you stress yourself too much and you don't have enough of the matching kind of replenishment, eventually you're going to burn out. That's a downhill slide. And the things that used to be easy for you become difficult. The things that used to be difficult for you to handle become impossible. And it's all because we have mismanaged that equation between stress and replenishment. It's pretty obvious when you think about it like that. If you get too much stress and you don't have enough filling the tank back up, eventually you're going to run out of gas, and that's what happens to most people. It also can happen the other way around, and I know this. Many people don't usually experience this until they get to the point of retirement. But I've watched this happen where people either quit a job or retire from a job and they have too much replenishment. They have too much time to do nothing. They,
mhm.
they may go on vacation, endlessly, or move down to the beach or buy a motorhome and start driving that. And they get so much replenishment that eventually they go looking for some stress. Um, Many of us, right? They go looking for something to do, right? I mean, we used to say that about our dad. Like my narrative growing up about our dads was, if dad retires and doesn't have something meaningful to do, dad is not going to live very long after he retires.
Mhm,
That's what my generation used to think. And we can understand that. You don't have something meaningful to do. It turns out we need the stress of
mhm,
doing meaningful work. But even that kind of stress needs the balance of replenishment. You've got to keep stress and replenishment in balance. I also see it this way. A lot of times people looking for replenishment go do things that are not that are replenishing for a while, but you get too much of them and then you feel burned out. I've seen this happen where people will take a weekend and just go, well, I'm just going to binge watch Netflix all weekend long. And they do. And then Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, they're like, I don't feel any better than I did at the beginning of the weekend,
Yeah. Yeah.
because somewhere along the way, that good replenishment of taking some downtime turned into too much replenishment. And then the brain fog sets in just like it would if you had too much stress. So we really have to keep these things, in balance.
All right. So I know that you're going to share some of your techniques that you use in your practice with people.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting. My 14-year-old the other day, I said we need a vacation, and he said, "Well, I don't know why. We go off and we come back, and we're just as tired as we were." And I've had these conversations over the years with plenty of people, and you're like, you go on vacation, and it's almost like because you
Yeah.
put too much in, you pack too much in. It's always packing and packing, trying to get the most out of everything, but that is exhausting. And at home, like you
Exactly.
mentioned, you get off of work, but then you feel like you have to plug all of the spaces, or I don't know if everybody feels this way, but I see my calendar does that. Somebody will reach out and um you say, "Oh, do you have time to do this?" Well, technically I do, so it would be a lie if I said no. But at the same time, I kind of need that time
Yeah.
to replenish, like you're talking about. So then I plug it. And I think a lot of people do that, where they say, I have to make use of this time. So I guess saying the word no is a good one. Would you like to share some of the others?
Yeah. And the thing that I have learned about myself and about others too is that we're just not very good at this. We're just not very good at replenishing ourselves, keeping our tank full. We're good at emptying it out. We know how to do that.
For
We're
sure.
just not very skilled at replenishment. And the reason we're not is not because we're dumb or not because we can't figure things out. It's because nobody ever really taught us how to do this.
Mhm.
Everybody taught us how to work hard, but they never
Right.
taught us how to do the other side of it. And so what I learned in this process is I think there are 5 things that we all normally and naturally reach for when we get tired. And what I just did was take those 5 things and put them together into a plan so that we could follow that and use that as a guide to help us get the things that we need. So if we're going to balance our stress with the kind of replenishment that we need, we've got to know that we need these 5 things and then weave them into the right rhythms in our life. The first one is rest. That seems pretty obvious. Let's just go get some rest. But it's amazing when I talk to folks and ask them, hey, if I gave you 2 or 3 days to go get some rest, would you even know what to do to come back more rested than you were when you left? And most people have that reaction right there, Christina. They're like, yeah, I don't know. And I didn't know either. But here's what helps us to rest. And this is going to sound like the simplest thing ever. Rest is about not working,
Yeah.
about whatever it is we put in the work bucket. Like we have to stop doing that. So, for instance, for some people, like mowing their yard and taking care of their yard, that is work of the worst kind. That's me. I hate that kind of stuff. For other people, a day spent trimming their, trees and mowing their grass, that is total bliss for them. I don't understand that, but they tell me that that's true. That is restful to them.
Yeah.
What's true for both of us though is that we all have to find things that that give us a chance to stop working. So what I encourage people to do is under the idea of rest, identify periods of time when you don't work. I call them no work zones. So, when is the time you're going to set aside to not work? Now, if I remember anything about reading the Bible, right, it's that there are these commandments, and number 4 of the 10 commandments was about not working. It was set aside time for a Sabbath, an entire 24-hour period to not produce work. And it wasn't really ever meant to be this legalistic thing, but it was meant to be a period of time that you set aside to stop running the world for a while and trust the one who runs the world. And
Mm.
uh, think about the people that command was given to. They're marching through the desert. They got no refrigerators. They've got no means of eating or drinking unless they work. And here, their creator tells them to stop working for a day and trust me to take care of your needs. That's what we need to do is set aside periods of time like that during our day, during our week, during our month, even annually, periodically, every 3 or 4 months or every year. We used to call them vacations, right? Where you set aside periods of time to not work. And what we have often done with those vacation times is that we have jammed them so full of activities that require us to work.
Mhm.
Like where I live out here in Las Vegas, everybody loves buying those, desert toys, the ATVs and the four-wheelers and all that stuff and haul them out in the desert. And it's fine. It's great. Get all the ones you want to. But what I've seen happen with people a lot of times is all the maintenance, all the effort, all the work
Mhm.
that comes with planning a trip like that and getting themselves out into the desert
Mhm.
actually is work.
Stressful.
It's
Yeah.
more stressful than not doing that. So you got to find time to do things that are not work, right?
Mhm.
Now, into those periods of time that are restful, that are not working periods of time, like for me, for just as an example, Saturday morning from the time I wake up until 2 in the afternoon is a no work zone for me. You will find me riding my bike. You'll find me walking the dogs. You'll find me watching college football during the fall. You'll find me doing anything except working. So I block that period of time out as a no work zone. You'll find me doing that. My sleep hours from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. are a no work zone for me. When 10 p.m. rolls around, it doesn't matter what's going on. We start turning the computer off, turning the phone off, doing all the stuff and calming down so that I can get some sleep. And when I wake up, I usually wake up at, 5:15, something like that in the morning. I do nothing until 6 because 10 to 6 is my no work zone. Um, the reason we need to set aside these times is because our work happens right here in our head. It's
Mhm.
not the work that we're doing with our hands necessarily, but it's all the work that's spinning in our head oftentimes. That's the work. And we need to get really good at shutting that off and being very conscious of when I'm on and when I'm off. So
Mhm.
those are the periods of rest. That's number one. The second thing you got to do is find what I call release. This is where we set down the emotionally heavy things and unpack our emotional baggage. We take the emotionally heavy things we're carrying, find appropriate places to set them down. Um, for people who are followers of Jesus, there are two things that the Bible tells us to do with the emotionally heavy things that we're carrying things like sadness, things like fear and anxiety, things like anger. Those emotionally heavy things that we carry, there's two things that the Bible tells us to do. One, cast your cares on God, and two, bear one another's burdens.
Mhm.
So we ought to regularly set aside time to do an inventory of what we're carrying and take those things and just go, God, here you go. I'm trusting you with these things. And number two, find someone else to unpack it with, find another person to unpack that with. And so
Right.
having regular rhythms, whether they're weekly rhythms or monthly rhythms or maybe quarterly rhythms of getting with, that's what going to see a counselor is about. I mean, counselors are a great place to do that. I think you can do that with a great group of friends, where you just get together and go, how y'all doing? And have people just share the things that they're carrying emotionally. They can unpack it there. So you got to have these regular rhythms of emotional release like that. Otherwise, you will just carry that stuff around and it'll wear you out from the inside.
Right. I want to actually interject there. So,
Yeah.
one of the things I believe that is difficult for a lot of people is this idea of, hey, can I be vulnerable with others? Because we live in such a time where everybody posts everything that
Yeah.
looks perfect. They don't share anything. I mean,
Sure.
sometimes, I guess, depending on your relationship, they may share deeper things, but it's more of like, hey, I don't want to be a burden, or B, somebody else is going through things, so I don't want to put more on them, or oh, I can't let this person know. that this is going on because they might judge. So, can you speak to that a minute? How do we become vulnerable um, and be able just to be flat out honest? Because this is biblical.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I really find that it takes the cultivating of those kind of relationships. I mean, you're not just going to go out and just unload on anybody you just happen to be having coffee with, but you have to
Right.
cultivate those kind of relationships. And if you see that kind of relationship forming with somebody, just have the conversation about the kind of conversation you want to be able to have. Hey, could we have this kind of conversation? Would that be okay with you?
Yeah.
And if we did, could we do it around this kind of framework that we don't like we don't share stuff outside of this conversation with other people, that we just confide in one another? Could we do that? And if the person agrees to it, then you can, again, take some small steps into that. Same thing happens when a small group is forming. We are famous for wanting to get people together in groups, but oftentimes those groups stay arm's distance away, and somebody has to kind of break the ice a little bit and say, "Hey, can we be this kind of group of people? And can I go first?"
Hmm.
And oftentimes that the trust that you have or the trust that you express in other people to share your stuff will be reciprocated. Obviously, again, we got to be careful with it. And your point is great. We do need to be careful with it and find the right people. Um, Again, counselors are a great place to do this because they're kind of sworn to secrecy on our stuff. I mean,
Hmm.
they have to hold things in confidence. But find those people. Ask God to show you, lead you to those people who are I call them my unpacking people. Um,
Unpacking.
yeah, sometimes they're mentors, right? Sometimes
Sure.
they're just good friends. I have a counselor here in town that I go and see when I need to. Um, but uh, but to have regular rhythms that we do this, and again, that's I think the key is not wait until things build up so much that they are just burying us, but find regular rhythms to unpack. I heard Andy Stanley say one time, he says, "You do not want to smuggle baggage from last year into next year." Or from last month into next month. And I love that picture that it gives me of me unwittingly like smuggling this heavy baggage into the next thing that I'm doing, and rather get really good at unpacking that on a regular basis and setting that down. Again, cast your cares on God and bear one another's burdens. Those are the two things that we're supposed to do to release what I call release these heavy emotional things. That's a part of our replenishment. That's a part of what makes us lighter, right? The third thing that I talk about is what I call receive. And this is where we get in touch with our sense of purpose and mission. And this isn't just for business people or for leaders or whatever. This is for stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads that run families, people who are enmeshed in the work of their family as well. Is that we got to remember why we're doing that, and we've got to stay inspired in that sense of purpose for our families. Because what I know happens to our purpose is this: the difficulties and the challenges that we run into in life and in work and in everywhere else we go beat the living purpose right out of us. We can forget why it is we're working so hard homeschooling our kids, why it is we're working so hard at our jobs to take care of our families and those kind of things. If you forget your why, if you lose your sense of why, your energy and your motivation will go with it. And so we need to set aside time and practices that help keep us inspired around our personal sense of purpose and mission. Um, Again, I have seen it so many times when parents start out with such great vision and such great sense of mission around their family, and then just the difficulty of navigating day-to-day life causes all that sense of calling and mission and purpose to just go right out the window. And pretty soon it's just like, hey, just eat your Cheerios and let's go. I mean, we just the care level comes down because we're just worn out.
All
But
right.
but this is where we've got to stay refueled on our purpose. Purpose is fuel. It is just our sense of calling to our whether it's work in the business community, whether it's work in our homes, our sense of calling is our fuel. It's what keeps us energized for that. And we've got to do things to keep that fire lit. That is a fire that will go out if you don't keep feeding it. So what are the regular practices that help you keep feeding the fire of your purpose? Certainly going to church helps with that. If you've got a great pastor or leader that speaks to that, there's podcasts you can listen to, but where do you go to get that fire restoked for that purpose? And then the last two things I talk about are pretty the easy ones: recreation, having some fun, and being physically active, physically recreational, and then relationships. Who are the people that you just love to be with because they're just life-giving friends and family? Uh, those two round out the five things that we need: rest, release, receive around our sense of purpose, recreation, and then relationships. We need healthy doses of all five of those things, regular rhythms around all five of those things. And so, what I love to see happen is when people take those five, identify practices in each of those categories, and then put those practices on their actual calendar. Because that's when somebody has really made a commitment to, I'm going to start keeping this tank full in here so that I can be my best, so that I can show up at my best, so I can bring my best to the table in every situation that I'm in. That's what helps keep our tank full.
For sure. I know that you could have an entire coaching program on number 4, the recreation, like
Oh
being able
man.
to get over this mindset of I don't have time and all that, but probably all the rest of it as well. Because rest is something that I, I believe is very difficult to achieve, especially if you have very high achieving people. Like when you look at something and say, oh, if I'm still, then I must be lazy. If I have downtime, then I should be doing something.
Yeah.
There's that little, thing in the back of your head that's always like, well, what should you be doing? What can you fill this space with? Um,
Yeah.
and
Well, Christina, you bring up a great point because you're exactly right. There is this drive inside of us that will push us all past our limits if we're not careful.
Mhm.
And especially with successful people. I run into this all the time with people who are high achieving people. Um, the thing that I like to ask them is why? Like,
Mhm.
what is the driver behind all of that? Is it a healthy driver or is it an unhealthy one?
Mhm.
And I really believe this, and I talk about these in my book as adaptive challenges. Adaptive challenges are different from technical challenges. There's some guys at Harvard that did some study around this kind of stuff and did some research around it. But they separated technical kinds of work from adaptive work. Technical stuff are things like screwing in a light bulb, changing your air filters, technical kinds of things, right? Adaptive things are human problems that oftentimes we bring to the table and don't even recognize we're doing it. Um, I talk about adaptive challenges in this replenishment world, like toxic responsibility, people that have such a high sense of responsibility that responsibility sense of responsibility has literally become toxic to them. In other words, they can't not be responsible. They have to be responsible for everything and shoulder the weight of every part of the organization or every part of the family. It's the if it is to be, it's up to me kind of thing. And it's very noble. It sounds very noble, but there's a point at which you can tip over into a toxic level of that. Um, Another one is chronic, what I call it chronic improvement. It's the classic perfectionist. Everything can get a little bit better. Everything can be sharper. Everything can be cleaner. Everything can be done better. Let's just keep going and make it better and don't, and it's the perfectionist. The problem with that is, well, know as I do, there's no such thing as perfection out there somewhere, right? I mean, everything can be made a little better, but you can see how when these kinds of adaptive challenges get in our head, they will take us beyond our limits and push us past all of our limits and never let us rest.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of grinning a little bit on some of these things because I can very much relate. as a mom, and a lot of, I think, moms and probably even homeschool moms I know for sure are that toxic responsibility that you talk about when
Yeah.
like it, and maybe it's with all moms, I just can't speak for everybody, but
Mhm.
this idea of, oh, I have to help my kid do this. And my husband and I have had these conversations about how I need to back off because they have to start being responsible for themselves. And even with we homeschool, but one of my well, all of them are going to co-ops, and one of the kids that I have, my middle kid, is going to a new co-op this year, and they are having them interact with the teachers online through email and through their own websites. And I don't know if this is normal when they go to public school, but this is seventh grade, and the idea is for them to be accountable. They CC us if they have any questions, but they're supposed to take that initiative to reach out. And so, my thoughts are as a mom, I'm like, okay, are they doing everything they're supposed to do? Are they asking the right questions? Are they, what is
Yeah.
that's going on, this accountability piece? So I think there
Yeah.
is a struggle with that because you hear a whole host of different things from, hey, they need independence to, no, they still need a lot of accountability. So it's this heave and ho of how do I raise
Yeah.
kids because I want them to be and achieve a certain thing.
Yeah.
However, at the same time, I need to back off and let them kind of come into it on their own. And my husband's like, you have to let them fail. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
that word is awful. I'm like, I
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Mm,
And that may be the perfectionist a little bit in there too. And yeah, some of the rest of them are things like what I call hyper urgency. Like
yeah.
everything's got to be done right now. Let's get it all done today. Let's hair on fire, let's keep going. Selective discipline so a selective discipline person is a person who says this, because I'm so disciplined in this area of my life, I can let it slide in this area of my life. They were very disciplined in particular areas, but very undisciplined in other areas and let other things go. The the one of the other ones is over serving. I see this
Mhm.
a lot of times in great mothers that they have such a heart bent to serve their family, but because of this trait of over serving, they can feel like they've got to serve, they've just got to put themselves completely aside for the sake of serving everybody around them. So these adaptive traits like this, they all have a healthy version. Like for instance, I would say um, probably Christina, for you, responsibility, that drive to improve things and make things better and make them great. Those are probably your best qualities. You know, I I know for me, like responsibility was one of my best qualities. It's what made me I think a pretty good executive pastor of a church.
Right.
The problem was, and this is the part that gets us, when we overuse our best qualities to our own detriment. When we overuse our best qualities to our own detriment, we overuse responsibility, we overuse that improver side of us, we overuse the achiever, the urgent. There's an appropriate level of urgency that we should teach to our kids. Hey, we got to move it. Let's get going now. Let's know how to be urgent about it. But overusing those qualities to our own detriment is where is the stuff that burnout is made of. And I heard this
Mhm.
quote. It's this. It was a long time ago. I read it in this book years and years and years ago. He said, "An unguarded strength is a double weakness. An unguarded strength is a double weakness." And oftentimes, when we take our strengths of being responsible and being the improver, being the achiever, all those things, and we don't guard those strengths, they become the weakness in us that actually drives us into burnout, because those things become the voices in our head that drive us past all of our limits. They're the voices in their head that talk us out of things that we should be talking ourselves into, like getting some rest, like having some fun, like getting with people that we love, like taking time to pause and unpack a little bit of the emotional weight that I'm carrying around, or getting back in touch with our purpose. Those things will talk us out of doing all of that stuff and just keep us running and running and running and never stopping. And so we've got to all do a little self-examination of, am I overusing my best qualities to the point that I'm driving myself to burnout?
For sure. And what I think I heard earlier is that this may be cliche, but self care is not selfish necessarily. I think a
Yeah,
lot of times there's that stigma of being lazy, but and self care doesn't mean that you necessarily, for I guess for women, go get your nails done, go shopping, whatever. But it just means taking that time to rest, like you said.
absolutely. Well,
Uh,
there's a difference. I think the thing we worry about, in fact, I think I've watched a lot of moms worry about, is they worry about being self-indulgent.
mm,
Now, the difference is this: self-indulgence is taking care of yourself to the exclusion of everybody else.
right,
Self-care is taking care of yourself for the benefit of other people.
right, right. I think that's
And
just such a hard one though for people because they do relate that to
yeah,
selfishness or laziness, maybe.
absolutely. But it's not when you are doing it for the benefit of others, when you're doing it so that I can bring my best to the table for the
Mhm.
benefit of those people around me. But
Right.
I just know that I can't do that if I'm just constantly wearing myself out.
For sure. And the other side of that too, and we need to probably actually have you tell everybody more about your book and where to get it in just a second. But I think the other part of that is that the more you do it, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the more that you do that, where you're burning yourself out at the expense of doing everything for others, you train those other people to expect this from you so that you again feel like you can't stop doing it. It becomes like you're on the hamster wheel. Does that make sense? Am I on the right
That
track
is
there?
absolutely true. That is absolutely true. Yeah, you tell everybody else that you can count on me for everything, and
Mhm,
you essentially lure them in with your toxic responsibility or
mhm,
your hyper, urgency. You lure
mhm.
them into your world, and then they start treating you like you're the only person who's responsible for everything or whatever.
Right.
And yeah,
So I'm sorry. So when you have the opportunity or you make up your mind to take a step to the side and say, "Hey, I'm going to take care of myself so that I am stronger," and they have um the reaction where they have this expectation because you've trained them. I kind of want to end on this maybe. Do you have any encouragement for that person that says, "Hey, I don't know that I can step to the side because I already have built this world where everybody expects me to be a certain way. And if I step off to the side, I'm going to have an earful of it."
yeah. Actually, if you could think about it as development of your family, because I hear this a lot from people in business roles. I hear people this a lot from people in church roles that you know I don't like when my spouse, my husband or my wife is working so much. I hate when they feel like they have to constantly go and go. I hate when my kids feel like they're stressed out and driven by all the things that they've got to be at. And then we feed into that because we do the same thing. But if you can think of it as retraining not just yourself, but retraining your whole family, like helping your whole family to find margin, setting the right levels of rhythms and patterns around these different things to say to your kids, it's let's take a break in our day right now. Put your homework aside, put your chores aside. Let's just come and sit for a minute and just take a break and just talk together and just enjoy each other's company. And we're going to do that for the next 45 minutes. You're setting an example for your kids that will be so valuable to them as they wander into high school and into college. And listen, college students are the most burned out people in the world because they feel the
For
pressure of
sure.
achievement. And they feel it a lot of times from their parents who said, "Hey, we're spending all this money to send you to college and you've got to get the degree and you've got to go do this." Like we're just training them to be burned out, and we
Right.
can
For
we
sure.
can train them better. And so if we think about doing it for others and not just doing it for ourselves, it's going to help us find the motivation to do it.
Right.
That's part of our purpose, right? As moms, as dads, uh, as people who are leading families, as people who are leading businesses or leading churches. It's part of our job to set the example for others, set a healthy example for others in the way that they live. And so if we can think about it like that, maybe it'll help you to go, I'm not just doing this for me. I'm not just doing this for my
Right.
sake. I'm actually helping set a different tone for our family so that we can enjoy each other and not just drag each other along in the fast pace of the lives that we have carved out to live.
For sure. I think that 45 minutes that you talked about, it used to be called dinner. I remember Charles Stanley said
Exactly.
something to the effect of how important dinner was. Years ago, I listened to a sermon or a talk he
Yeah.
did, and he talked about the importance of getting the family around the dinner table, and that's almost non-existent in a lot
Mhm.
of families nowadays. Mitch, can you tell us where we can find your book? And also, I'd like to invite you to share any scripture or anything for the audience.
Sure. Yeah. The book, it looks like this. It's called Running on Full. And you can find it at Amazon or I think Barnes and Noble website has it. You can get the Kindle version of it. And it in the book, it talks about all of the things that we have talked about today and gives you this framework and actually gives you a worksheet that you can download and use to build your plan around those five rhythms of rest, release, receive, recreate, and relate, so that you can build some healthy rhythms around that, put them on your calendar, and then use those. So all of that, you'll find that all in the book. The one scripture I would want to point you to is this, and it really has become the anchor for me and for this work that I do. It's Matthew 11:28 through 30. And when I quote this, you'll know exactly what it says because you probably heard this before. But Jesus says, come to me, all of you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens. So if anybody is listening and they're weary and carrying heavy burdens, Jesus says, hey, come to me, come to me. And then he says, he says, learn from me, take my yoke upon you. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And can't even fathom that, can we? To think, how in the world would Jesus' yoke be light? What would a light burden be? But
Right.
I think of it like this. I think the reason he said that is he's saying, look, there is a different kind of life in following me, where he says, if you will learn my way of doing life, if you will think about the yoke that I put on you, it will be far lighter than the yoke that you put on you.
Hmm.
And the burden of responsibility that we put on ourselves for our families, for our marriages, for our businesses, for our churches, we put this yoke on ourselves that is so heavy that we have to do everything. We have to perform perfectly. We have to get the kids everywhere they're supposed to be. We have to do this all without flaw and cram it all into a, you know, 12, 15, 18-hour day so that I can try to get some sleep and do it all over again tomorrow. That is a yoke that we invented. That is not Jesus' yoke for us. That is not what he puts on us. His yoke that he puts on us, the weight that he asks us to carry is far lighter than the weight that we ask ourselves to carry. And so he just says, if you come to me, you'll find rest for your souls. And that's what we're looking for. And so I hope you'll take that Matthew 11:28 through 30, read that a couple of times with those things in mind and see if God begins to help you unravel some of the stuff that you've been carrying way too heavy. And then maybe you just take those burdens, cast them on Jesus, take those burdens, share them with a friend, find real purpose and mission and meaning in what you're doing, have some fun along the way, get some great people around you, and take those periods of time to just rest and let God run the world for a while and see what that does for you every day.
God run the world for a while. I like it. That's great. And so you said that Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Is there anywhere else that I know you have a coaching program? You said where else can everybody find you?
Yeah, you can find me at refillcoaching.com. Refill coaching is just a simple practice that I put together to help people, to help businesses, to help business leaders, and I have different ways of going about doing that. Part of what it is this chart that you see behind me is a part of the process that I use to help people begin to identify who they are when they are at their best, and then how to find ways to avoid the negative and the downside of burning out. Um, and again, I worked with businesses, I work with individuals around this. to really help them find the best rhythms for their life so that they can bring their best to the table all the time.
Well, thank you so much, Mitch. I really appreciate you being here. For those of you out there, continue to be blessed and bless others, and we'll see you next time.
We would love it if you downloaded this episode, subscribed to the show, and shared away. You never know who might need to hear what has been said today. Thanks for listening.